To this live stream of Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is Mike November Whiskey coming to you ever from my basement to talk about a very special subject tonight. Tonight we are talking about the 737 BBJ, or Boeing Business Jet. Why are we talking about this tonight? Well, in about 3 days' time is the 2022 eastbound edition of VATSIM's Across the Pond event. This event on the VATSIM Simulated Air Traffic Control Network is the largest event that they produce, where 1,000 pilots will be flying across the ocean in perfect harmony together. This is a very special event because it's done in real time, so if you're flying from JFK to London, it's going to take you 7 hours to get there. And it's just a wonderful experience. I've done it once. This will be my second time doing it. I'll be flying it in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So why are we talking about the Boeing Business Jet? Well, in Microsoft Flight Sim, it's still a relatively young simulator. So there are not a ton of Oceanic capable, VATSIM appropriate airliners out there to fly. You could theoretically fly the stock 787 that comes with the premium deluxe edition of Microsoft Flight Simulator, but to have a really immersive experience and to really make sure that you can adhere to all of the instructions you're given during the Across the Pond event, it's best that you fly a plane that is as close to study level as possible. So with that in mind, what are your options in Microsoft Flight Simulator? Well, there's a great A320 brought to you by the Phoenix team. There's another great A320 by the Fly-by-Wire team. There's also the PMDG 737. But what all these planes have in common is that they're all short-haul regional jets. They are not made for oceanic crossings, with one very unique exception, the Boeing Business Jet. So the Boeing Business Jet, or BBJ, is a variant of the 737 regional jet. But unlike the typical commercial jet that many of us may have flown on before, it has a bit of a different configuration that actually makes it an excellent choice for cross the ocean crossings. Reason being, the business jet is meant as a private plane, effectively. It's the same body as a 737-700, 800, or 900, so it looks like a commercial jetliner from the outside. But on the inside, you can think of it as like an Air Force One. You know, that's a converted 747. This is a converted 737 for private business jet purposes, let's say. So it's meant to carry far less people. Where a commercial version of the 737 could carry 100 plus passengers, the BBJ can be 30, 40, let's say. And their cargo needs are also way lower because not everyone is bringing in like 500 pounds worth of luggage. 40 people is going to have far less luggage than 150. So with all that extra space, what can you do? You can add auxiliary fuel tanks. So the Boeing Business Jet can carry, I think in the 737-800 version of it, the BBJ-2, what they call it, which is based on the 737-800, I think can carry an extra 7 auxiliary fuel tanks. And what those auxiliary fuel tanks do is it extends the range. Now suddenly you have a regional jet that can fly across the ocean. So it's great. PMDG released the 737-700 and 737-800 over the summer. And with those packages, you have access to a BBJ variant of this plane. Oh, Dane Flats, how's it going? And hey, child, how are you doing? What is your question? Well, I'll wait for Dane to respond. I'll keep on going with the intro. So actually, this is a good point to also just disclaim. I am not a real pilot. If anything, I'm a pilot in training. I do not know how to fly 737s in the real world, so please do not use this for any real world applications. It's purely for flight simulation fun. Yeah, absolutely. Tonight is exclusively tutorial on the BBJ, so it's going to be like a lot of me talking and not a lot of me flying. So if your friends are cool with that, feel free to raid. Otherwise, I won't be offended if you go look for another channel that's actually going to be doing a lot of flying tonight. But tonight's purpose is to get folks ready Oh, sweet. Awesome. And if you guys have questions too, the whole idea of tonight is to get folks ready for the Cross the Pond event, which is happening on VATSIM in a few days. There were a lot of questions in the Discord about the BBJ, so I want to make sure folks had a resource for how to do it appropriately. Sweet. And thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Oh man, now the pressure's on. I thought I was going to be all alone tonight. Now I actually have to like teach people something. All right, sounds good. So we'll slow roll the tutorial a bit then while we wait for Dane to come back with their friends, so the folks can get the maximum value out of this. Hey, Death X Rider, how's it going? Welcome to the channel. We're taking a brief pause because we're waiting for a raid to arrive, and then we'll continue with the tutorial. So far, all I've covered is what the BBJ is. So if you know that already, you're already well on your way. But tonight, we'll basically be going through a full pre-flight. Nice, yeah. We're not going to be doing a ton of flying, but we will be getting in the cockpit and we will be doing a full pre-flight. I'll be talking through things like how to set up a Simbrief profile for the PMDG 737, how to put in your flight plan for across the pond, how to make sure you know where your data is for Oceanic Clearance, all that good stuff. While we wait, are any of you guys flying across the pond on Saturday? I'm going to be a normal sim tonight, but I will be talking about how to connect to VATSIM with the BBJ. You should make the leap, child. If you find a quiet night with not a lot of traffic, you'll have all the support you need to figure things out. Well, here's the thing. You probably will, but that's a part of the whole learning experience. Just adjusting my desk here. I'll probably be connecting to the East server, but I'm not planning to actually fly on it tonight. As you can see, we'll be at Grantley Adams tonight for this tutorial. I think the first slot for across the pond is going to be, I think, 10:50 Zulu on Saturday morning. So that'd be 6:50 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. And those first flights will be going out of Seattle because the Seattle legs are the longest. They're going to need the most time in the air. My slot time, oh geez, when is my slot time? I think it's like 14:30 Zulu, just about then. I have it on my Twitch schedule, so you'll see when I'll go online on Saturday for my crossing. And I'll be here for 7 hours, so you could tune in, tune in anytime. We'll be flying from Grantley Adams in Barbados to Lisbon, Portugal. So looking forward to that. It's kind of a unique oceanic crossing because you're not going through the traditional Gander and Shanwick zones where the nat tracks are further up north. We'll be going through, testing my memory here, Piarco Oceanic and Santa Rosa Oceanic? Hey, Death X Rider, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. And thanks for your patience. Again, we're waiting for a raid to arrive, and then we'll continue with the tutorial. But yeah, so looking at the little syllabus I came up with. We're going to be talking about selecting the plane in Microsoft Flight Sim and what not to do. There are some common mistakes that folks make when loading the PMDG up in Microsoft Flight Sim that can affect their experience. So we'll show you how to avoid some pitfalls there. We'll talk about the initial power-up. We'll talk about how to set up the BBJ, what settings in the PMDG FMC to select in order to make sure that the BBJ is actually configured for Oceanic. Talk about how to create that Simbrief profile, make sure you have your weights in there correctly. It's not easy to find the weights. I actually went into the PMDG code to see what weights the mod was actually using, so that your Simbrief flight plans can reflect what the PMDG product is actually doing. We'll talk about how to enter your flight plan. It's a bit nuanced when you're dealing with latitude and longitude coordinates. We'll talk about how to manage wind. Wind on a long-haul flight like this becomes a lot more important for fuel management and fuel calculations, so you'll want to make sure that you're using wind data appropriately. Talk about performance calculations. Talk about final flows, including the auxiliary fuel panels, which are unique to the BBJ. And then we'll talk about how to find the data you need for Oceanic Clearance. And I think that's probably when we'll call it a night, unless you guys have other questions. Death, no, I aspire to pilot in real life. I'm kind of doing flight sim to scratch the itch until I can actually commit to it for real. I'm guessing about 2 years out from actually taking flying lessons, but I've been simming for a number of years now. And my goal is realism, so I try to take it as seriously as possible. But if you're flying for real, don't take my advice. All right, we'll probably give... Yeah, that's been the best part about being a part of the flight sim community is everyone's available and willing to teach you something. So just by getting in the sim and doing it and flying on VATSIM and joining the discords and watching other YouTubers do their thing, you just pick up so much over time. Like, it's kind of a pitfall though, because they say if you're overconfident before you step into a cockpit for real the first time, then it's going to be kind of a rude awakening. Like, even if you feel like you've done all the studying you should have done before taking a real flying lesson, you really have to approach it assuming you know nothing. Just really be as modest as possible about it. But hopefully this will give me a head start and save some money in terms of lessons. All right, let's see. All right, we'll give him to 2 o'clock Zulu. That's another 2 minutes. If they're not here, we'll just get started. Oh my God! Hello, Dane Flats and all of your friends. You guys made it. Appreciate it. This is. I think this is the largest raid I've ever had, and I'm not even going to be flying. I'm just going to be doing a lot of talking and teaching tonight. So I hope you guys are cool with a BBJ tutorial. If any of you all are flying across the pond. Sweet. Okay. Let me quickly go over what we went over already, just so everyone's on the same page. So tonight is a tutorial for how to fly the PMDG BBJ for across the pond. And BBJ, oh, heyo. Nice. Awesome, DeathX Riot, that's awesome. I'm actually flying British Airways as my call sign for Saturday's Across the Pond event. But anyway, yes, so we're talking BBJ. BBJ is the Boeing business jet. It's a variant of the Boeing 737, which is a very popular regional jet that many airliners use for short-haul flights. Not meant for oceanic crossings, for crossing the ocean. But the BBJ is unique because it is meant for private business use, and as such, it's not built for carrying 150 passengers. It's built for carrying 40. It's not built for having a whole cargo hold full of luggage. It's meant to carry the cargo of just 40 people. So with all that extra space, you can fill it with extra fuel tanks. And with extra fuel tanks, you get to fly longer. You get to go greater distances. So when you're trying to think of what plane to fly that's study level, that's really well simulated for an event like VATSIM's Cross the Pond, where you want that level of realism, Microsoft Flight Simulator doesn't have a lot of great study level commercial airliner options that could do an oceanic crossing. So the PMDG 737 BBJ, whether it's the 700 or 800 variant, is a fantastic option for doing this crossing in as realistic a way as possible. So BBJ, oh my goodness, that's amazing. Yes, BBJ, I get it. Sweet, thanks for the subscription, appreciate it. All right, so I'd say let's just jump into it. Oh, the other disclaimer is I'm not a pilot, don't use this for real world flying. I'm a real pilot idiot, but a moderate expert in flight sim. So with that out of the way, let's jump into Flight Simulator here. So as you see, we are looking at starting up at Gate 10 at Grantley Adams in Barbados. This is where I'll be departing from on Saturday's Cross the Pond event, and things to look out for when you are selecting your plane, your BBJ. If you have the PMDG mod installed, you're going to have several variants of the 737 to choose from. So I have the 737-800, and that product comes with 4 different variants. It comes with the standard commercial liner, a couple of cargo variants, and then the BBJ2, which just means it's the 737-800 variant of the BBJ versus the 700 or the 900. When you select it, a lot of flight simmers are accustomed to going over to weight and balance and selecting their payload and their fuel. Do not touch this. Do not touch this. The mod is not meant to work with the Microsoft interfaces. You set all of your weight and balance data in the plane itself. So please do not touch this menu or you're going to have a really bad time. Yeah, no, it's crazy. The BBJ's capabilities are pretty awesome in that regard. There are some weird limitations, like it feels a little underpowered. It takes a long time to get to cruise with all that fuel on board, but we'll cover that when we get there. But anyway, on the livery question, this is another thing that came up in the VATSIM discords this week. There aren't really a lot of great livery options for the BBJ because it's meant to be a private jet. So you're not going to have a British Airways livery or a Qantas livery. You're going to have these pretty generic, boring liveries. But don't let that stop you from flying commercial, because we'll just hop over to VATSIM real quick. When you log in to your VATSIM client, and you choose a call sign that represents an actual airliner. So let's say British Airways 984. If other simmers have their model matching set up correctly, it's just going to read your call sign and your type code. And you're still going to appear as a British Airways jetliner on VATSIM to other players, or other simmers rather, even though on your sim your livery is just generic and boring. So there was some confusion on the discourse about that. You could still fly a commercial call sign on VATSIM when you're flying the BBJ. It's no problem. Also, the type code. It's the same type code as the commercial version of the 737. So in this case, we're flying the BBJ variant of the 737-800. So the type code is still B738. You don't need to do BBJ2. That's kind of meaningless. The ICAO code for the aircraft is still the same because the airframe is still the same. And CellCal code, if you're familiar with Cross the Pond, you're going to be issued a CellCal code. This is meant for pinging you on the HF frequency when you're over oceanic airspace. It will be assigned. You just need to copy and paste from your Cross the Pond registration information, which should be given out to pilots the night before the event. And that's what you need to know about connecting the BBJ to VATSIM. All right, so enough of that. Let's get into the sim, shall we? All right, so we have our BBJ selected. We're starting at Gate 10 at Grantley Adams. Let's load up. And this should load up relatively quickly because I have loaded the PMDG before, but if it's your first time loading the plane, it may take a while. All right, that was nice and quick. Oh, and there's some nice weather at Grantley Adams. So this is just a nice time to admire the fact that I downloaded the premium scenery for Grantley Adams. So we can have accurate taxiway markings and parking markings and all that good stuff, but you also get to look at how beautiful this airport is in Barbados. I've never actually been, but it is pretty stunning. And you're looking at the sim running on an RTX 3080 Ti running on ultra settings. So it's pretty much as beautiful as you can get. Unless you have a 4090, but we won't talk about that. Excuse me. All right, so let's talk about initial power up real quick. It's the same stuff that you're probably used to in the regular 737. Get our batteries on, emergency exit lights on, get our nav and logo lights on, let folks on the ground know that we're here. And you can go through initial flows up here, up top. That's fine. I'll do that later on. Right now, I'm just focused on getting ground power established because it was available. So now we have AC power, and we can confirm we're on the ground power selection knob here, and we're getting voltage readings there. Next up, I would go through all the various tests. So it's all about testing initially before you kind of go any further. Real pilot flows vary from airline to airline. They all have different procedures. This is just how the way I do it. Adapt it to your own needs. But I like to do all the system tests before I go any further. So we test our fire systems. All looks good. Test our fire squibs, which are the things that actually put out the fires. Test our cargo fire system, similar deal. Come up top, test our flight recorder, set the test, light goes off, back to normal, light comes on. Do our mock warning test, nice little beeps. And you know what, I just realized you're not hearing any of this because I turned the sim sound off. There we go. That should sound better. Stall warning. This works half the time. I think it's a PMDG-ism, so I'm not too concerned about it. Flap light tests. Great. And while we're up here, we'll just get our inertial IRS systems aligned over to nav, on DC power them over to align. And then we can move this wheel over here to heading status, and it will tell us how long it will take for the IRS to align. In this case, about 6 minutes. And that's probably because we're closer to the equator. I think the further south we are, the shorter time it takes. Next, we'll kind of come down this console and make sure everything's configured the way it should be. We have 3 green lights for gear down. Gear lever is down. We are looking next at our autopilot lights. All look good there. And then my favorite test of all, the light test. You just flip that switch on, and you get just beautiful illumination all throughout the cockpit. Every single light should be active and on at this point. It's just a beautiful way to look at this thing. All right, fun stuff on the lights and all that stuff. Okay, so now let's get into more BBJ stuff. So here is your flight management computer. I think that's what it stands for, FMC. We want to make sure your BBJ is set up for oceanic crossing, right? So let's go to PMDG setup. We'll go to aircraft. We'll go to equipment. I won't go through all 16 of these pages. There's a lot of content here, and actually the PMDG guys probably will do a better job in their tutorial videos going through all of this than I will. But we are going to talk about page 11, the auxiliary fuel page. When you first load this up, it's going to look something like this. Auxiliary fuel system, none. We want to activate that, make it available, and then we want to maximize the number of tanks we have, just to maximize our fuel capacity, just to make sure that we're definitely going to have enough for oceanic crossing. For my route, I'm probably only going to use about 20,000 kilograms, but I don't mind having the extra fuel tanks on board just for the optionality of carrying more if I need to. 7 fuel tanks is the max for the BBJ2. And it tells you very conveniently how much that's actually going to weigh at full capacity. That will come into play later when we look at our Simbrief profile. And that's really the most important thing about setting up the BBJ for fuel. You will notice that there are a few new instruments and dials. Let's see if I can get a better view of this. Here we go. So down here is the auxiliary fuel panel. when we load up our fuel, this will show how much fuel you have in the forward and aft auxiliary fuel tanks. Nothing really else you need to worry about this panel for. It just kind of tells you that specific quantity, because it will not be counted in the fuel quantity in your center tank that's indicated here in this middle computer screen. You have your left wing, your right wing, and your center fuel tank that is independent of the auxiliary fuel tanks. All right, the other new panel is actually up here up top, where you have the auxiliary fuel transfer panel right here above your power panel. And this should just be set to auto at all times. Don't worry about turning it off. What this does is the way the fuel actually pumps through the system. There are no fuel pumps for the auxiliary tanks. It uses pressure differential between the cabin and the tank to push fuel into the center tanks. And if you lose cabin pressure for any reason, then the bleed air system will actually pump bleed air into the auxiliary fuel tanks to create pressure, to maintain pressure. And having this in auto mode, I believe, is what allows that system to take over if there is a pressure loss in the cabin. Way more information that you need to know. All you need to know for flying this thing is just leave it on auto and you'll be fine. So those are the main systematic changes for the BBJ. So next, what I'd like to do in my setup flow is the OFP review, operating flight plan, and setting my fuel and payload, my weight and balance information. So we're going to hop over to Simbrief, and I'm going to walk you through how to set up a Simbrief profile for the BBJ. There's some decent ones available online just to download. You can kind of search for like Simbrief profile for the BBJ, and you can be on your happy way. I want it to be excessively precise, so I'm going to show you the precise values that I found in the PMDG code that I put in my Simbrief profile to make sure that I'm generating flight plans specifically for the plane I'm using. So to create that new plane, here is your Simbrief dispatch menu. We're on the new flight screen. We're going to go over to My Fleet, and you would go to New Airframe. Here you can select, there is a BBJ airframe to start with. So we are the 737 BBJ-2, which is for the 800 series. Click Proceed. And it's going to pre-fill a lot of information for you already. And you don't need to touch anything up top. The first thing we're going to touch down here is the passengers and the weights below. So I have my PMDG set up for kilograms. I like to operate in kilograms. It just more universal, just kind of generally makes it easier, personal preference. So I just kind of set that over to kilograms here. And we're going to start with how to set this. So I'm actually going to get out of this menu. I'm going to show you the plane I've already set up, which has the values that you need to copy down. And we'll start from there. So max passengers, it says 48. If we come back into the plane and we go to payload, I'm just going to set this to empty right now. You'll see that there is a maximum number of guests on this version of the BBJ. It is 48. So you simply put 48 in the max passenger field on your Simbrief profile. All right. The next thing you need to worry about with passengers is how much they weigh. So how much should your Simbrief program assume that each passenger is going to weigh, how much they're going to add to the payload of the plane? And this I found in PMDG documentation. It is approximately 88 kilograms. So that's what we need for passenger weight. And we assume they're not carrying any carry-on baggage. It's going to be separate from what we consider the cargo payload. All right. If we come here for forward cargo and aft cargo, you could set that to max, add these numbers up, and that's your total cargo capacity. So that's what we put in here. Max cargo weight, 8,004 kilograms. Next up, fuel capacity. You'll notice that when we set up the auxiliary fuel tanks on that menu, it showed you what the max capacity was. Just copy and paste. Max fuel capacity from that menu is the max fuel capacity you'll put in your profile. Now the next ones were a bit more challenging to find. I actually had to go digging through code to find all of this, but we can verify that it is approximately correct. So if we go back and we set the payload to empty, and we go back and set the fuel to 0 kilograms, we have our gross weight of 56.4. This is effectively our empty weight. with nothing on board, no fuel, no payload. And in the code, I found that the empty weight that the sim uses is exactly 46,351, rounded up to 46.4. It matches what's in the flight management computer. So that's how you know it's correct. Awesome. Max zero fuel weight is basically the max effectively cargo and payload it can carry, assuming zero fuel. Yeah, so with there's a great software application. The question from Child is, how did I find the stuff in the code? What is it called now? I'm completely blanking. I'll find it. 1 second. So all the code files are available. It's in your community folder. You just kind of have to go like looking for it. But there is a text reader that I use that's fantastic. It's free. Let me see if I can find it for you real quick. Sublime text. Sublime like the band, text. And you can go through the PMDG files and community folder. There is a file called aircraft config, and it has all kinds of wonderful information about how the plane itself is actually configured. You can play around with it. I wouldn't recommend it because it's going to cause all kinds of issues. But that's how I found it. Just looked through the different files in my community folder. But that's basically where I found zero fuel weights, max takeoff weights, landing weights, and some of that is available here. So max takeoff weight is in the sim in your payload screen. You'll see here in the top right corner, it's 79.2. And if we go back to what I found in code, it's actually exactly 79,243. It's like a ridiculous amount of precision that I went through to get these numbers. It's definitely overkill, but if you really want the most accurate Simbrief profile possible, just print screen, copy my numbers here, and you're good to go. Don't need to worry about default cost index too much or fuel factor. Service ceiling is what it is. We're really just looking to adjust the passenger and weights, and that's all we need. So now when we're actually setting up our flight plan, I'm going to be British Airways 9084, which will be my call sign for Saturday. We are going from Grantley Adams to, nope, that's not it, to Lisbon, Portugal. We are not going to have an alternate. What an alternate does, it just adds extra information to your flight plan for another airport you can fly to. If you can't land at your destination for whatever reason, it calculates more fuel to get you there. For across the pond, don't worry about alternates, just your depart and arrival, all you need. We'll talk about extra fuel in a second. Your dates and departure, we can actually set it right now actually to when I'm going to leave. I think I'm flying out at like, yeah, actually very close to this. Actually, no, sorry, 14:30 Zulu, let's say. That's my assigned takeoff time. And for airframe, we'll select the saved profile. In this case, here it is, the BBJ 2 that we just created. For your OFP layout, totally personal preference. I like Lido. I also like the Ryanair version. But again, choose whatever one you know how to read and what works for you. I like kilogram for units. We're not going to do ETOPS planning. Even though it is an ETOPS capable aircraft, we don't need to worry about ETOPS for Oceanic crossing for across the pond. We are only going to one airport. We're not planning for emergencies. We're not planning for detours or deviations. The controllers will probably hate you for that because they're managing so much traffic. We don't need ETOPS. Just don't worry about it. Step climbs. This is very important. For flying Oceanic in such a heavy aircraft, like the 737 BBJ, your altitude that the plane is capable of, we saw max ceiling is 41,000 feet. When you're full of fuel for an Oceanic crossing, there is no way in hell you're going to make 41,000 feet at your initial cruise. You're just too heavy. You need to burn off a ton of fuel before you can get to 41,000 feet. So for across the pond, they focus on what altitude you're capable of flying when you enter Oceanic airspace. And that is the altitude you're going to be at the whole time. When you have planned step climbs checked here, Simbrief is going to optimize your altitude for fuel burn, because you will burn less fuel the higher you are in the less dense air. So it's more economical to climb as high as you can, and as you burn fuel off, climb a little higher, and then climb a little higher, and then climb a little higher. For across the pond, nuh-uh. You're going to be stuck at whatever cruise level you can achieve by the time you enter the ocean, and you're there for the rest of the flight, which means you're going to burn more fuel. So you don't want Simbrief to be a more aggressive fuel figure, a more economical fuel figure. You want it to be like the F-150 of flight plans. It's just going to burn the fuel, whether you like it or not. So uncheck step climbs, and it's just going to get you to a cruise level you can achieve and keep you there. Runway analysis, at your option. We'll just uncheck it for now. No TAMs and FIR no TAMs. Again, at your option. Don't need to really worry about that for across the pond. Yeah, no, it's good stuff, that step climb. Like, use it in regular flying, and you'd have to request ATC, hey, like, can we increase our altitude to X? Because that's now our optimal. But for across the pond, forget about it. All right, so climb profile, descent profile, these are just climb and cruise speeds. I wouldn't really play with it. It's kind of set for the BBJ profile and Simbrief. But it basically means you're going to expect like a Mach 7.8 on your cruise once you get up there. Cruise profile, this is your cost index. I leave it in auto. This is just basically, usually it's assigned by the airline, like how economical you want your route to be. Higher cost index, I think, burns more fuel, and lower one burns less. I may have that backwards, but usually it's like assigned by the airline, like what your cost index should be assumed to be. Here, we'll just leave it as auto. Let Simbrief do what it wants to do. Don't need to worry too much about it. Fuel factor, this is just an offset. If you're flying with a Simbrief profile and you find your actual plane is burning more fuel than it predicts or less fuel than it predicts, then you can have it adjust itself, either -5 or +5 or however you want to offset it until you get to a more precise estimation of the actual fuel you're using. I am not that obsessed with fuel usage. It's close enough. I leave it at P00. All right. So here for optional entries, you're going to be given your routing by the Cross the Pond organizers, right? It's not going to be what Simbrief generates for you. You're going to be given your route. And with that, you'll be given pilot briefings that may give you information about what runway you're likely to expect. So I know for Grantley Adams, we're all departing runway 9 on Saturday, so runway 9 is selected. I believe we can expect runway 20 at Lisbon. I can't recall what the brief did, but let's assume it did, so we select 20. I don't really worry about the other fields except for this one, extra fuel. This is a biggie for across the pond, because the flight plan will tell you the fuel you need to get to your destination with a little extra, a little contingency fuel. But because of the number of planes that will be flying in the air for the event, there's going to be delays. You're going to be taxiing for longer than you probably normally would. You may be asked to hold. Your holds might be for a very long time. It may be a long taxi line into your gate when you arrive. There will be plenty of opportunities for delays and deviations and things that will just put you in the air longer than your flight plan thought you would. So definitely bring extra fuel. Definitely bring extra fuel. I'd say you could check this drop down. You can choose minutes. I like to think about it in terms of minutes. I think an extra 30 is a healthy amount. If you've never flown it before and you're a bit more nervous about running out of fuel, or you're not as comfortable with fuel planning, definitely take an hour. I think an hour extra is safe. It adds extra weight to your plane, but it's not so much that you won't get to where you're going. And that's that. So down here, your routing, this is what's generated by Simbrief, basically from your Cross the Pond dashboard, which I'll just flash here. This is my dashboard. I'm going to have my routing posted here on Friday night. I'm just going to copy it there, and I'm just going to paste it in here, and that will be it. I do know that for Grantley Adams, our first waypoint is going to be 14 North, 57 West. So I'm just going to choose a flight plan here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. We could turn on the FIRs so we could see the different oceanic zones. So this one takes us from Piarco Oceanic to New York Oceanic, which will be offline for the event, but don't worry, there'll be coverage, into Santa Maria Oceanic. So that will be the extent of our oceanic crossing. And that looks fine to me. All right, so that's all set. We copied and pasted our route. We have our extra fuel. We have our runways set. We have our depart and arrival. That's all we need to worry about. Let's generate this flight. And here we go. All right. So this is where you get your OFP. I like to do the print view PDF. It just gets it in a nicer format. It's kind of easier to read. I'm probably going to have an iPad on my side here so I can kind of reference it. But things to note here. There are a long list of downloads down here. I like to download my vPilot flight plan, and this is what I will upload to my vPilot client and file. You still need to file a flight plan with Cross the Pond. They're not going to assume that you correctly copied and pasted over your routing that you were assigned. You need to actually go through the process of filing a flight plan like you normally would. Just make sure that the flight plan matches the one you were given. But what I want to focus on here are the specific PMDG flight plans that you can download. And the two of note here is the PMDG flight plan and the PMDG wind uplink. I'm not going to go through how to load these up tonight. I wouldn't recommend it for the event for reasons I'll cover in a second. But these are pretty cool tools if you don't want to manually put in all of your flight plan information in your FMC. There's a great tutorial on the Navigraph website, which I'm just flashing up here, which walks you through how to export your Simbrief flight plan to the PMDG mod for FlightSim. Reference this. It's going to be different whether you bought the thing on Steam or you bought it on the Microsoft Store, or how you got your sim. So that's why I'm not going to go through it now. There's too many entry points to kind of getting this to work. But if you want an automatic upload of your flight plan to your PMDG sim, go to the Navigraph website, look up this tutorial. It's fantastic. And you'll need these two files from here, from your Simbrief profile to enable that. All right, but since we're going to do this manually, we'll look at our flight plan here, and I think it is time to talk about entering your flight plan and wind into your PMDG mod. So let's go back to the plane. All right, here we are. So while we're here, I'm just going to reference my flight plan for the fuel. I'll flash it on the screen one more time to show you where I'm getting this information. So for fuel, we're looking for the total block fuel. So for this oceanic crossing, they're estimating we need 20,547, and that includes the extra hour, as indicated here by the time, an extra 1 hour of fuel that we opted in our Simbrief options. So that's inclusive. So 20,547 is what we put in the fuel number here. 20,547. All right. Go back, go to payload. Payload, the easiest way to put this in is to look at your zero fuel weight. So here you have two rows of weights. You have your maximum. This is based on your Simbrief profile, the thing that we set up with all the specific numbers from the code. That's how this is reflected, and this is how Simbrief knows to keep you underweight. And here's your estimated for the actual flight that you've planned. So the zero fuel weight we want to look at here is 50,135. So we'll just round that to 50.1. 50.1. And we'll just click next to the zero fuel weight, and it will automatically estimate your guests and your cargo. Now, if you have a flight plan output format that gives you your cargo figures, that gives you the number of passengers, as I think this one does, since we put in the accurate weights in the Simbrief profile, it should spit out the same number. But I like to keep it simple. I look at the zero fuel weight number and let the sim determine what that means in terms of cargo, what that means in terms of guests, and just to keep the plane balanced. But for interest's sake, I'm going to look at the flight plan again and see. All right, so they've estimated 43 passengers, but only 3.8 tons of cargo. And I bet you if we did the math, right, I think we have way less cargo than that estimate by some amount. I think offline, I'm not going to waste my time with it now, but I'm pretty sure if you back out the numbers, it should be equivalent. All right, so that's the payload set. Zero fuel weight is set. All looks good. And we can double check our gross weight, 70.6. It should be in the realm of our takeoff weight. Takeoff weight will be a little bit less because it's assuming that you're going to be burning some fuel on the way to the runway. So I think it looks like in the flight plan it's 70.5, here it's 70.6. That difference is totally fine. All right, now let's actually do the setup here. So starting up from our menu, you see it's shouting at us. It wants us to put in our IRS position. That'll be the first thing we do. So click on FMC. Just make sure everything looks good. We are in the BBJ2. Engine rating looks fine. We have the latest ARIC cycle. It's still current. Fantastic. Go to the POS init page. We can put in our reference airport if you like. Tango, Bravo, Papa, Bravo. And sometimes you can even put in your gate. Sometimes it actually knows the GPS of your gate. So let's see, we're at gate 10. Does it know it? It does. And you can see it's in the ballpark, so it's fairly accurate. This top number is your last position. This is the position of your airport and this position of your gate. And ideally the gate and the last position should match. But if we go to the next page, we can also pull our GPS position, which is separate from your IRS position, put that in your scratch pad, come back here, set IRS position, and your FMC becomes really happy with you. Excellent. All right, next up we go to the route page. We put in our origin. Now here, if you went through the Navigraph tutorial to actually put that flight plan profile in your PMDG directory, you can hit flight plan request and it would automatically load everything for you. It's magic, it's great, it's prone to error. That's why I like to do it myself, because I can confirm that what I put in is exactly matching the flight plan that I'm expecting. Yes, it takes a few more minutes, but it's good practice. It's good to know how your system works manually before you use the automation. It's just kind of a mantra I have. It's why I drive manual cars. I want to know how the car works before I do an automatic. All right, origin. It's already in our scratch pad, so we'll hit that in there. And we're expecting runway 9. Get that in there. Destination, Lima, Papa Papa Tango. Fantastic. Next step is to go to your depart and arrival. So there are no SIDs for Grant Lee Adams Airport. We know this. It's in our briefing. We're going to be flying runway heading on takeoff, so we'll take that into account. So we just need to worry about the runway here. But if there were SIDs available for this airport, it would show up in this list and you'd be able to select it here. All right, next we go to the routes. We go to the next page, and now comes the fun part of actually putting our flight plan information in. So I'm going to see if I can get a side-by-side of the flight plan in a way that you can also see the FMC. So give me a sec here. Well, that just makes it smaller. You can tell I'm a bit of a OFP noob. All right, well, let's do it this way. We'll move it to this side. And I'll just zoom in. All right, let's get the flight plan section. Here we go, the routes. All right, we can see enough of it. So the first waypoint here is 14 north, 57 west. This is a great lesson in how to put this into the FMC. It's a weird format. You can't just put in 14 north, 57 west. For northern hemisphere, western hemisphere, so kind of like the top left quadrant of the Earth, if you're looking at a conventional map, the format to put in 14 north, 57 west is 14, 57 north. And I think the north is what tells the FMC that you're talking about the northern and western hemisphere, the top left quadrant. I think in the southwest, if you're flying out of Brazil for across the pond, it would be the latitude, longitude, and west. That's how the FMC knows you're talking about that quadrant. It's an interesting system. It works, but that's how that's the syntax for getting that in there. All right, our next waypoint is that's interesting. 1845 north, 52 west. So I wonder if it's including minutes as well. And I'm not sure if it will actually take minutes. This will be an interesting test. So let's actually go ahead and test it. I don't think it will work, but we'll do 1845. Actually, I know for a fact it won't work. North. It's going to say invalid entry. Yep, there it is. So I think in this case, we just stick to the first number. So 18 north, 52 west. So 1852 north. This will be something to Google after the fact to see how you handle minutes in your flight plan. So 2247 is the next one. So 2247 north. 2542 north. 2837 north. And when you run out of space, just click next page and you get more lines. 3132 north. 3327 north. 3522 north. It's a long trip. 3617 north. And then direct to LUTAC, so just a normal waypoint. Next page. And then we have an airway, so UN 870. And that will be our VIA. It's not a single waypoint, you can tell, because it's a combination of letters and numbers. So we put that in the VIA slot, so UN 870. So it basically means follow every waypoint on that airway until the next waypoint, which in this case is Busan. And then on the flight plan, we see the next instruction is actually our star, Busan 5 Delta. A waypoint and some kind of a designation is a good signal that that is your star. So now that we have our route in, we go back to depart arrive. We click the arrival next to our destination airport. We're expecting ILS 20. That will filter the available stars for that runway. And we're looking for the Busan 5 Delta, the second one right here. Selected. I haven't looked at the chart, but we'll assume we want the large transition. It's fine. That's selected. And then we can go back to routes. Look for any discontinuities. We do have one here, so we're just going to do from Upket to Larn. We'll just get rid of that. This could be a vectoring instruction, so you should refer to your charts. If you're expected to be vectored after Upcat and it specifies the charts, then don't get rid of the discontinuity. You want to leave it. But if you did want to get rid of the discontinuity, you can go ahead and click on Larn B, get that in your scratch pad, and put it right above to get rid of that discontinuity. So now you get a nice direct your approach transition, then you get to your runway. So you kind of review this, make sure it all looks good, all matches your flight plan, or you're happy with it, you go ahead and activate. In real life, you would then cross-check it with your co-pilot. If it's cross-checked, then you hit execute, and now it becomes your active route. So now what we can do, we can go up here, we can select plan mode, so you get a different view here. Get the yoke out of the way. And from there, we can actually step through our route step by step. So I'm going to zoom out a bit because I think this is our first waypoint after we take off. Yep, there's Grantley Adams, there we are. That's our first waypoint in oceanic space. And we can hit the step button to go through every waypoint to make sure that it makes sense and it looks good. If it will actually get us to Lisbon. All right, there's LUTAC, that's our transition. We could zoom in a bit now. Continue stepping. There's Busan, and it looks like it gets us to our runway. There's some weirdness here with the transition, clearly. If I looked at the charts, we probably could have avoided that. But this is why it's good to step through your flight plan to make sure that what you've actually selected makes sense. In this case, it does not, so we'd go back and fix it. I'm not going to do that now. I think you get the idea. Yeah, it's always good. Always refer to your charts first. It's a good practice. All right. So get out of plan mode, go back to map. I like to keep it about 20 miles for takeoff. It's my personal preference. And we have that in. All right. So next up would be performance. So go back to init.ref, and now we're on our perf init page. This is all about putting in your flight plan information. I go from bottom top and then top down. That's just a flow I picked up from a real pilot. So we still have our flight plan up on our screen. All of our information we need is here. Starting with the cost index of 8. Reserves is this number down here. Your fin res plus your alternate. We already don't have an alternate tonight. That could be your reserve number. I am actually going to add that to the extra hour of fuel that we're taking. So I'm just going to do some math in my head and kind of estimate it, because it won't take all the decimals, of course. So 2364 plus 937 is like 22, just about 3,300. So we'll do 3.3. We'll put in our zero fuel weight. We've already put it in already. So actually, if you click it, it will put in the scratch pad what you put in previously, and you can just paste it in there. And then it's estimating that your ideal cruise altitude is 36,600. That will come into play later. But we'll just put in the cruise altitude that we've been assigned in our flight plan. And that is flight level 350 in this case. 350 is our cruise alt. Cruise wind. The lazy way is to come to your OFP and put in your average wind, 254041. Another option I've seen some pilots do is that if you scroll down below your routing detail, you usually get nice wind information at different waypoints at different altitudes. So others I've seen just put in the wind at the top of climb at your cruise level. Either one is fine if you're being lazy about it, but I'll explain in a minute why we want to not be lazy about it for across the pond. So 260.33, we'll put that in there for now. There it is. Transition altitude we will get from your charts. If you're not in the United States, it won't be 18,000. So definitely refer to your charts to ensure what your transition altitude is. We'll assume that all looks good to us. Don't need to worry about the next page. We'll go ahead and hit execute. So now we have an active performance init page. And then we'll go to N1 limit. There's an unable 280 knots at Busan. This is probably a result of a speed restriction. I'll show you in a second how to get rid of that error message, but let's do our N1 limit first. So this is a fun page to play with if you have a performance calculator. If you don't worry about it. Don't do a D rate. Select standard climb. Don't worry about the selected altitude. Just leave it as is. If you don't have a performance calculator and you don't really want to play around with it, this just means you're going to be using maximum power and fastest climb, which honestly is not a bad thing for across the pond. You might want to get to your cruise altitude as quickly as possible. But if you do have a performance calculator, go ahead and play around with this. It's a lot of fun. Soon, the PMDG will add a tablet that will be right here to your left. It's currently blank, but there will be a tablet here. It should come with a performance calculator that you can use for the sim. There are pay options out there. Use it if it really drives you crazy not to have one. But the AFB should be released in the next month or two, hopefully. So you'll be able to use that for performance calculations once that's released. But for across the pond, leave it as is. Don't worry too much about it. Then go to your takeoff. Set flaps. I think these runways should be long enough. Flap 1 is fine. If you want to be a bit more conservative, flap 5. So we'll just assume flap 5. Center of gravity is already calculated for you, so just go ahead and click that and put that in, and you'll get your trim number. That trim relates to the trim here on your trim wheel. So just go ahead and get that to about 5.5. That looks good enough. And that's all set. And then here it will give you estimated V speeds. You can get this from your performance calculator, but again, if you don't have one, just click them in, and you're ready to go. And you're ready for pre-flight. That is all done. Now let's take care of this unable 280 knots at Busan. Actually, we can pull up Navigraph. Why not? I'll clean up the screen for you. I'll get the flight plan off the screen. All right, actually, I think we have a version of this flight already loaded, so we'll just use this for charts. And if we go to the star, if we look for Busan, was it 5 Delta we wanted? Yeah, so there's a max 280 knot restriction at Busan. The FMC wants us to go 280 knots, but if we go to our descent page, you'll see we have a target speed that is less than that. If we put in /280, I bet you that error message goes away. So now you'll be able to achieve 280. Since it's a max restriction, you could also just choose to ignore it. It's fine to go slower over that waypoint. You may be given assigned speeds from across the pond to controllers anyway, but if you don't want to deal with that error the entire flight, this is how to fix it. Just make sure that your target speeds are reflective of the stars that you're flying, or the SIDS if you have an issue with one of the waypoints on your climb. Neat little trick there. Yeah, I see a comment about TopCat. It's a very popular performance calculator. My understanding, it hasn't been updated in a long time. And you're better with performance calculators that have put in the parameters of your specific mod specifically. Different airframes come with different engines, come with different configurations that all impacts performance. So if your performance calculator is not using that data that your mod is actually using, it's not going to be accurate. I found one online. I'll flash it really quick. I think I've used it on the channel before. It's called Virtual Performance Calculator. And it's payware. You do have to pay for it. It's not terribly expensive, but they do have a profile that is based on the PMDG, especially like the weight and balance. I think somewhere here you can actually choose I forget where it is now, but somewhere in this tool, like they've actually put in the PMDG parameters, so it gets you pretty close. But again, PMDG is getting a performance calculator pretty soon, so I would opt to wait for that. I wouldn't worry about this too much. All right, so just look at my notes here. What are we talking about next? All right, let's talk about wind. All right. So if you go to your legs page, you'll notice there is a route data page. This will be important for a number of reasons. We can talk about it now. It not only lists all your waypoints and anticipated winds, but it also tells you your expected ETA that you're going to cross that point based on where you are now. This is going to just keep moving forward because we're standing still on the ground. So as we wait here, these numbers will increase. But once you're at cruise, this is the page you'll go to know when you're going to cross into oceanic airspace. Okay. So yeah, let's actually talk about this now because it's pretty important. Let's talk about how to get the data you need to get your oceanic clearance. So the data you need is your call sign, your destination, requested flight level, maximum flight level, your Mach number they're going to use in cruise flight over the ocean, entry point and time, which we can get from here, and TMI, which I don't know what it stands for, but it's basically like the literal number day of the year. And I think for across the bottom, I think it's gonna be 295 if I'm not mistaken. That information is all in that track. Like it should be obvious. What we're going to focus on is the data that you get from your airplane. So the data you get from your airplane is your requested flight level. Actually, no, your requested flight level is going to be assigned to you in your flight plan. You'll get your maximum flight level from your sim, and you'll get your entry point in time from your sim. So if your entry point, let's say into, I don't know exactly what the waypoint is. It will be obvious on your briefing, but let's say it's 2542 north. Once we're at cruise, once we're at a stable speed, and we're about 40 minutes away from entering oceanic airspace, we go back to the legs page, go to route data, and if it says 184 Zulu, for that waypoint, that's what you put into your oceanic clearance request. Easy enough. For your flight level, I actually need to remind myself where you get this. Oh yes, here we go. In your cruise page here, you have your optimal flight level and you have your max. Max, as you burn fuel, is going to creep up over time. Remember we talked about step climbs. This is where your flight computer is going to calculate based on your current weight the maximum ceiling you can achieve based on that. So as you burn more fuel, actually both the optimal and the max altitudes will increase as your flight goes on. For oceanic crossing, you only put in for that max field the max you can achieve at that crossing. So if you know you're going to get to 41,000 feet eventually, No, put in what your computer is telling you is your maximum possible now when you're getting your clearance. So it's this max number here. For optimal, we may not be able to fly your optimal across the pond. You're going to be flying the cruise that you've been assigned, which is here over on the left. But you can always request of your controller to step climb if you wish. If you're getting worried about fuel, if your fuel calculations on your progress page is telling you you're going to land with like negative fuel and it's really freaking you out, then request the step climb to get some more efficiency. They may not give it to you, but if you really want it and you feel you need it, take it. Otherwise, just stay at your assigned altitude. ATC is actually not silent. So what's interesting is it's better for it's more convenient for the pilots, because you could actually like take your headset off and just hang around your computer and wait for the cell cal ping when they want to talk to you. But I think the controller is always there waiting to respond, because they're always going to be introducing new planes into oceanic airspace and handing planes off when they leave. So they're going to be at their station the entire time. So you can raise them on the radio whenever you need to. It's going to be quiet. It tends to be pretty silent, but they're always going to be there. Yeah. So in real life, it's on HF frequency, which is a higher frequency band, can go over longer distances. It's incredibly noisy, a lot of background noise and static. I think what we use on continental trips is VHF radio signals. It's a bit cleaner, a bit clearer. And what's great about VATSIM is that they simulate the interference on HF radio frequencies. But you don't want to listen to that for 7 hours, which is why they have the cell call system. So again, once you're in Oceanic, you've introduced yourself, they've confirmed that you're there, you can request a cell cal check to make sure that that works. And then you just take your headset off, wait for the ping if they want to reach you, put your headset back on, and then deal with the static then. Like otherwise, pilots would just go absolutely insane if they had to listen to that over the ocean for hours at a time. What is it? Necessity breeds innovation? Definitely applies in this case. All right, so that's how to pull your oceanic information out of your FMC. Easy, right? Awesome. All right, now let's talk about wind. So this is definitely not required for cross the pond. It's a bit of an obsessive thing, but again, it adds to the realism, and I just like to use the data I have. I want to be as precise as possible. So remember when we put in our cruise wind, and we pulled that number, I'll pull the flight plan up again. Pull it over here so you can see it and get the flight plan up. Yeah, we pulled 260.33. That is exactly what we're seeing here, right? But it's assuming that we're at that constant wind for the entire trip, and that's absolutely not the case. And actually the winds look like they're going to be insane for cross the pond next week. So you probably want to put in the wind data as you go ahead and cross. So you see in this chart we have on the flight plan, we have wind data for that flight level for every waypoint across the ocean. And you can go ahead and update it. So for example, at 2247, which actually is off the screen. Let's do 31, 32. You can see the winds are 276 at 32. So 31, 32. We can put in 276 at 32 and just replace it. And then it's just going to assume that's what it's going to be for the rest of the trip, but we can go through each one individually and do the same thing. So we'll just do one more. So for the next one, 273 at 42. And so on. You can go ahead and just update all the winds for the rest of the trip. You hit execute, and it's just going to make your fuel calculations and predictions a lot more accurate. You notice on the progress page, once you update all of your winds, you'll probably notice that the fuel quantity that you're expected to have when you land will be different because it's taking those new wind factors into account. On cross the pond, since you're going to be in the air for so long, you'll want to update your wind information at some point. So for when you're doing your descent winds, right? We go to the descent page, you go to forecast, you would typically estimate your descent at flight level 310, at flight level 200, and flight level 100, or 10,000 if you're flying in North America. You would want to regenerate your flight plan. You'd want to come back and get another copy of this that's just fresher, newer data, and you would pull that wind information from your descent section here. So 310, 200, and 100 to calculate optimal profile for your descent. So that's all I have to say on winds. Again, this is extra credit stuff, but adds to the realism and it makes your fuel planning a bit more accurate. Cool. All right. So I think the only thing left I had planned for tonight, unless there are specific questions you guys want to go through, is how to finish your pre-flight and make sure you have all the checklists you need for your crossing. All right, so we'll just go ahead and execute with the data we put in. That's fine. I like to keep myself on the, what page do I like when I take off? I actually like the takeoff page, so I'm gonna have a reference for my V speeds. And then on the other FMC, I either have it on the progress page or on the route or legs page. Personal preference, it's fine. But let's go through final flows and actually do pushback. So with the flows, I like to go from left to right, top to bottom. At this point, we are on AC power, so we can activate the yaw damper. Everything on the navigation should be normal and automatic. Cross feed, you can do a cross feed test. You could turn that on and you want it to go bright and then dim, and then bright and then off. For fuel pumps, now that we're completely refueled, you can put on all of these fuel pumps. You'll also want to put on your center pumps because you actually have fuel in them. And you can confirm you have fuel in them by looking at your center console. We have almost 13,000 kilograms in there. And another indication that you can use those pumps is that the low pressure light turns on and then turns off, because there won't be low pressure if there's fuel in there. So there you go. That all looks good to me. Again, auxiliary fuel should be on auto. Power, these are just monitoring systems, so that's fine. We're going to be on the APU just now, so we could turn that over to APU Gen. Your utility and seat power is on. All of these are guarded. Your wipers are stowed. That looks fine. And at this point, we can go ahead and turn on the APU, so we can get off ground power for our pushback. You'll notice your EGT starts to spike. It's going to go all the way up. It's going to spike really high, then it's going to come down and normalize, and then we'll get over on the APU bus. So we'll do the rest of our flows while that thing is doing its thing. We can do the seatbelts to on now that we're done fueling. Coming up here, we could turn our window heats on. We'll wait for the pitot heats until we've pushed back, because there is risk of injury, I believe, if you heat up the pitot heats while still on stand if there's ground crew around. I can turn on our electric hydraulic pumps. We'll worry about the engine-based ones once the engines are on. And then all of our air conditioning systems to auto on. We'll do packs on auto for now. Isolation valve to open for startup. And your engine bleeds on. For your altitude, we're going to be at cruise level 35,000, so set that to 35,000. And we can worry about the landing altitude once we're closer to our destination. All right, so coming down here, we'll want to make sure our course is set for runway heading. So we'll assume that's 90 because we're doing runway 9. You just get this from your chart. I'm just assuming it now for expediency. You'd set your IAS Mach to your V2 speed, so that's 153. Heading, we're going to fly runway heading for across the pond based on the instructions. So we're going to take off and hold 90 degrees before we're cleared to proceed on course. Altitude, you would get this from your pilot briefing. I think the initial climate altitude for Saturday is 5,000 feet, if I recall. But again, just refer to your briefing or your clearance when you get it on the ground. That's all we need to worry about there. At this point, you could also get your flight directors on. Oh, what happened? Oh, hold on, wrong. That was the right button. I think my SPAD profile is not working. Give me 1 second. I use SPAD.next to do all my peripheral mappings. And it wasn't running this whole time. Oh yeah, it's awesome. It's a tough learning curve, but once you master it, it can do amazing things for you. All right, flight directors, you want to turn on your flight director first on the pilot side. That becomes the master. You could see that with the MA light that lights up, and then you can turn on the co-pilot's flight director. Coming down here, we want auto brakes RTO. Quickly check hydraulic fluid. It looks fine. There's plenty in there. Go back to engine. Coming down, our trim is set. Thrust on idle. We can just test configuration. We have the alarm. That looks good. Flaps are stowed. You can activate our parking brake. You want to make sure your comms are set and that your squawk is set. And at this point, when you're ready for pushback, it's probably good to set that to standby. So the ground controller can see you on the VATSIM network. Make sure your rudders are free and clear. It is by standard, so I'm not too worried about that. And then you can go through your checklist and make sure that you did everything you needed to do. So I use a Ryanair normal checklist for the 737. Just Google the Ryanair 737 Boeing normal checklist, and it has everything you need on here. You'll notice though it has before start checklist, and then it goes to then it has before taxi, and then it goes straight to shutdown. So you're like, well, where are the rest of my checklists? Well, in the real world, this is the actual checklist they use. They keep it on the windshield for startup, taxi, and then shutdown. But then all the other checklists on the Boeing are right here in front of you. And it's pretty bare bones. Like, there's more things you need to do in the air than what's listed here. And you could find great guides online to tell you like where all the different procedures are, but I'm trying to just learn it by memory. So once I'm in the air, I'm actually using the checklists here on the yoke in the sim, up all the way until after landing. It's pretty neat. All right, so our APU should be running at this point. It is. We have the nice blue light above the APU generator, so we can switch over to the APU bus on both sides. That means we're off ground power. We have voltage there on our power meter, and that all looks good to go. So we are ready for push and start. You would request this for across the pond like you would anywhere else. Again, refer to your briefing on specific procedures. We're just going to push back all the way to what looks like the taxiway for now. There's our boring livery, even though we're flying British Airways. All right, parking brake released. All right, so for for starting the engines, we'll need to turn the packs off so we can get all that nice bleed air directed to the engines. We'll turn the APU bleed on, get that nice dual bleed light. So now we have power or air pressure going to the engines to help with the startup. We'll select either the left or right igniter. You are supposed to alternate every flight, so just choose one, it's fine. And then flip on engine 2 to ground. So we should see N1 and N2 start to increase. Our next action is at N2 25%, and that's when we'll flip on the idle switch from cutoff to idle. So we're at 25% now. Engine 2 to idle. And that will activate the fuel flow and commence the rest of the startup. We can't start both engines at the same time, I believe, because there's only enough bleed air pressure to support the start of one engine. Although I think, I'm not sure about the Max, but like the 787, for example, the Dreamliner can do 2 engine starts at once, which is pretty nifty. We wait for the start valve to close, so we get no yellow lights on the right. We confirm that our switch up here is moved back to the off position, and then we can go ahead and start engine 1. So same deal, N2 starts to increase. And at 25%, we'll get the idle cutoff to the idle position. $25. Setting parking brake for the tug. Wait for that start valve to close. One thing I forgot to do is right before you start, you should turn your anti-collision light on as a signal to the ground that you're starting your engines. All right, so that's back to the off position. We're all good to go. Pushback is done. At this point, first thing you do before anything else, get on the engine buses, get off the APU. And at this point, you could shut off the APU, bleed, shut off the APU itself. You can confirm that your engines are generating power by going to Gen 1 and Gen 2. They are, looks good. And you get your packs back on. Isolation valve closed. At this point, you can get your pitot heat on, your engine hydraulics. And a good signal that you're ready to go is that when you do your scan, you have no orange lights. And we don't. It all looks good. But we do, thankfully, have a before taxi checklist, so I'll just go through that real quick. Generators are on, APU is off, start switches you set to continuous for takeoff. So there they are. Don't need, probe heat is on, we don't need anti-ice, air conditioner, packs are on auto, bleeds are on, isolation valve is set to auto, we've done all that already. Flaps, we are requiring flaps 5 for takeoff as per our performance selector, so we'll just set our lever to flap 5. Stabilizer trim is set to 5.6. We got that from the FMC already. Start levers are in idle, detent, flight controls. We'll just call it checked. Yep, alarm checked. Oh, I did not want to go in reverse. Oh boy, there we go. Gotta be careful with that. Flight controls checked, and then recall check. No errors on either side. So we are ready for taxi. As such, we'll request taxi clearance regarding our taxi routing. We'll assume we did all that. We'll get our taxi lights on. And we'll get rolling. So you never want to go above 40% N1 on the ground, just kind of a general convention. And you shouldn't need to, because otherwise you'll just start going super, super, super fast. I didn't actually pull onto the taxiway. I should have looked at that map better. We wanted to be on this center line, but we'll just move ourselves over. And generally, speed restrictions on taxiways are like less than 30 knots, let's say. While you're still in the apron, you probably want to go like 5. And when you're doing heavy turns, definitely no faster than 10. But we'll just get ourselves rolling here. Our ground speed, you can tell, is on the top left of our navigation display here. All right, pull back on the power a little bit. All right, so at this point, we want to start configuring for takeoff. So we'll get this set to TARA for anti-collision system. Confirm we are on rejected takeoff mode for the auto brakes. We'll want to activate auto throttle. And for modes, we're going to do heading select for lateral navigation and VNav for vertical, since we need to hold the heading until we're cleared to go to our first waypoint. And now I just get to enjoy a nice roll. On the day of the event, this is just going to be backed up all the way, I'm sure. Oh, get on that center line. This is a good visual reference as well. So we're on the center line here, and it looks like in my standard view that is going right straight down my altitude tape. So one thing we didn't do, because we're not on the network and we're not doing like a full simulation here, is we didn't get our ATIS information. I usually get the ATIS right after I've connected the power and once I've set payload information. Before I do anything else in the FMC, I get ATIS. I set my baro, all that good stuff. We just skipped that tonight. Let's see here. There we go, all the way down to the end of the runway there. Get back on center line. So I am actually going to go through the full takeoff because there's one last thing I want to show you that's specific to the BBJ, and will probably be the most exciting thing you do once you're over the ocean. Not to hype it up too much, but we'll do that as soon as we are airborne. Alright, power back to idle. Want to slow down for this turn to about 10 knots. Let's say tower tells us that we're cleared for takeoff, runway 9, and we say runway 9 cleared for takeoff. Get our landing lights on, runway turn off lights on, set our strobes on. Basically light ourselves up like a Christmas tree. You want all of these lights to be on, except for the wing and wheel. You don't need that on. Check our modes. Our auto throttle is armed. Heading select mode is selected. VNav is armed. Flight director active. V speed set. Initial altitude set. Baro set. Oh, a little bit late on the turn. I had a bit of a sim glitch there, but that's right, we're not that far off. Alright, so our line going right down the altitude strip. Power up to 40%. Ensure stable power at 40% N1. And toga. And power set. N1 toga. Airspeed's alive. You tell we are flying down the runway because we didn't do any D rates. We're gonna hit V1 in no time. V1, rotate. Gear up. Follow that flight director. Hand fly for a second. You don't need your feet on the rudders at this point because that yaw damper is taking over. All right, your acceleration altitude is going to have you pitch down. It'll start accelerating up. So we're approaching flap 1 speed. Go to flap 1. Approaching flaps up speed. Speed checked. Flaps up. this point, we'll set the autopilot. Command, autopilot is active. We're holding our track up to 5,000 feet. Clean up a bit. RTO, auto brake to off. We can get our runway turn off and taxi lights off. If we turned our packs off, if we were doing a performance takeoff, we can get our packs back on at this point, but we didn't, so that's fine. Oh yeah. So the overhead cockpit windows. This is not. They don't include this on new 737s anymore. This is a feature of an older version, but the PMDG actually lets you to opt this setting back in. So it's in the PMDG settings. You can opt to have these eyebrow windows put back in for you, which is actually a nice touch. It's a nice way. Like in cruise, I'll probably be in this view a lot because it's just so pretty. All right, that beep we heard was telling us that we're approaching our requested altitude. So at this point, let's pretend now that we have been cleared to our initial waypoint. And we're told that we can go direct 1457 north. I believe we just switch over to LNAV. LNAV active. And we'll just head for that course. If we were told to maybe skip that waypoint, go to the next one, it's fairly easy. Oh, we said MCP altitude. So since we're flying on VNAV mode, it wants us to climb. So if there was a SID, we can actually just set. I mean, ATC will clear you to the next altitude. So always just select the altitude that you're clear to. So let's assume we're cleared to 15,000 feet. Then VNAV mode will enable us to climb. So alt intervention, that'll get us climbing again. So N1, VNAV speed. And we'll get to that new altitude. N1 mode is basically just, it's like a climb thrust mode. It prioritizes thrust over speed. It just kind of gets you your best rate of climb. You can see where your N1 limits are in the N1 page. It's on auto right now. And for the climb, it targets a speed of 288 knots. But it adheres to speed restrictions below 10,000 feet, which is why we are still at 250 knots now. All right, so now you're on your way. That's all great. We covered oceanic clearances already. The last thing I'll tell you about the BBJ specifically before we wrap up this tutorial for the night is what you do when your center fuel tank empties. So you'll see your, oh, geez, there we go. Right now you have a ton of fuel in your center fuel tank, and you're using only that fuel. You'll prioritize the center fuel tank before the plane pulls from the wing tanks, mostly just for ease of maintaining balance, right? When this goes down to 0, and it will on this flight, you'll get a caution, and you'll get low pressure warnings here on the center fuel pumps. When that happens, again, this is the most exciting thing that's going to happen to you across the entire oceanic crossing for across the pond, is the moment that you get to turn off the fuel pumps. That's it. That's like the last thing I wanted to mention, is that when your center tanks run out of fuel and you get that error, turn off the pumps and enjoy the rest of your flight. That's it. I'll hang on for a few more minutes in case folks that are still on the line have questions. But I hope this was educational. I hope this hopefully made you feel more comfortable about taking the BBJ for a spin across the pond. There's really not that much to it. There's a lot of nuance, but the mod is very forgiving. So if you don't get everything right, you'll still be fine. But as long as you know how to fuel plan, get those fuel tanks added in your settings, and understand how to kind of manage your Simbrief profile with the flight plan that you're given for C2P, You're going to have a great time. So thank you all for joining. And again, I'll just hang on for a few more minutes and enjoy these beautiful views in case any of you guys have any questions. Yeah, I definitely overhyped turning off the fuel tanks. I apologize for that. But seriously, all the hard stuff is on the ground. Once you're in the air, you can just get to enjoy. It's like a big relief once your wheel's up and you're on your way. Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it. I'm going to take a quick look. Again, it's scheduled on my Twitch channel when I'll be online for that, for the Cross the Pond event. But my wheels up time that I've been assigned is 2:32 p.m. Zulu, so 14:32 Zulu. That's about 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. I'll be logging on an hour before that, so about 9:30 Eastern for the pre-flight. Should be a lot of fun. Hope to see you guys there. There is a view inside the passenger cabin, and I'm glad you've asked that. It's kind of hard to get to. Like you would think there would have been a quick view that they put into the PMDG sim, but they didn't. I think all these quick views are from the external view. But if you go to the showcase mode, maybe some of these have the internals. Oh yeah, here we go. So here's one enjoying nice croissants and a coffee and getting some work done in one of the cabins. Oop, not Navigraph, hold on. Oh, here's another one in the conference room with nice fresh fruit on the table. If those are the only interior views, I'll be really sad. Yeah, so, oh, there we are. But actually from here, let's see. Oh, so the question where I got this view. So I went to the camera menu and I went to showcase and I selected a fixed camera. There's also a free camera, which is a drone mode, which is kind of like free control. And with this, it's easier to do it on the ground because the plane's not moving. But you can actually, if I reduce the sensitivity of the drone, see if we can do a little cabin tour. So now we're in the cockpit. Some seats up front probably for the crew. Little wet bar. Some seats and tables, more croissants. Oh, the bathroom and a shower. Look at that. We got our conference room. We got some more generic passenger seating here. Some toilets. It's a real luxury liner, this thing, eh? Oh, and this is probably where you put all the secretaries. Like, they still have an economy cabin back here. That's kind of hilarious. I missed the pilot's lavatory. Oh, okay. Let's go back. Whoa. I feel like... Remember that movie with Harrison Ford? Oh, they didn't... You know what? It's not rendered. If you went to the bathroom in the PMDG, you would fly out the plane. Oh boy. But yeah. Pretty sweet. Yeah, with the BBJ, there is no such thing as first class or business. It's a private jet. It's configured to be a private jet. It's for corporate purposes. But yeah, I guess if you really needed, it's kind of interesting that they. I wonder what like the marketing name for this cabin is. Like you'd think like they would just splurge for like 6 more of these plush seats for the very back. But maybe it's for the crew cabin. I don't know. Nice. Yeah, if I was ever in a position to have a BBJ, if I worked in a company that had one of these things, like I would want to be the one flying it. I'd want to be the pilot. That's kind of like a life goal, to become like a CEO of a tech company, but also have my commercial license so I could fly myself around places. That sounds nice. Go back to this lovely view as well. So for example here, I took the headrests off. It's also an option. You can remove the headrests because it just gives you a nice, more open view. Oh, and it wants me to go to cruise. Look at that. VNav does not like me right now. So let's get ourselves up to cruise. I don't know why I'm still simming. I'm not actually flying this route. I'm not going to be here for 7 hours. This is the problem with getting on the sim. Like once you're on, you just want to stay on. Alt intervents, back to N1 mode, and we are climbing again. It should have mahogany pan. I like the way you think, child. It's a fantastic point. Like this like shag rug style. It's like so 1965. Oh, one test. Remember when we did all the tests when we first activated the power? One test we didn't do was the oxygen test. I always love this one. It seems so ridiculous. But here's your oxygen mask in case of loss of cabin pressure. Press this. Get a nice little oxygen ball pressing through that like a little rubber gasket. It's a nice touch. Yeah, all right. Well, I'm trying to think of what else to do. But I think that kind of covers it for what I want to cover tonight. I'm going to edit this on YouTube and add some chapters, make it a bit organized. So if you want to come back and reference it, if you want to go back to a specific section, like where I talk about Oceanic, or where I talk about weight and balance, or where I talk about the Simbrief profile, which might be probably the most valuable thing that I would cover tonight, is just getting that profile set up. You can reference it. My handle on YouTube is the same as my handle on Twitch. It's Mike November Whiskey, forever Mike November Whiskey. Feel free to follow me there as well. I stream exclusively on Twitch. I don't do a lot of static content on YouTube, so most of the action is going to be here. Yeah, one last shout out for Across the Pond, 9:30 Eastern on Saturday morning is when I'll be logging on, and I'll be flying from Barbados to Portugal with 1,000 other pilots crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It will be about a 7-hour flight. We'll probably be online for like 8+. Hope you all join me. It's going to be a long and lonely flight if I don't have folks to share it with. So hope to see you guys there. And again, thank you all for tuning in tonight. It's been Mike November Whiskey. I'm very active on the Across the Pond Discord channel. So if you guys have other questions or just want to chat, we can do so there with the other pilots that'll be flying. Thanks again. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time.